everyone, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Krista. I'm an international mom of two, a dental hygienist turned midwifery student, and here on my channel I talk about all things motherhood, midwifery, pregnancy, and childbirth education. So if these things are of interest to you, please follow along and get ready to birth and bloom. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you're here. If you are a subscriber, you may have noticed I've taken a little bit of time off. My family and I have been super busy. I was finishing up my quarter of midwifery school. We were doing some international travel, and I just decided to take a little bit of time off, regroup, enjoy my family, and now I'm excited to jump back into the YouTube world. So I'm really happy you're here. So today, what are we talking about? I want to talk about being home birth curious. So if you are a pregnant mom and you are maybe not so sure about where you want to give birth yet, this one's for you. It is not my job at all to try to convince anyone that a home birth is better than a hospital birth, that a hospital birth is better than a birth center birth. That is your decision to make. But this video is for the home birth curious. Maybe a mom or a mom-to-be that is interested in having a birth that is a little bit against the norm. Maybe you live in a state where you have some friends that have had a home birth, or maybe you live in a state where home birth is not something you've really heard about. So I hope that this video can maybe inspire some internal questions and doing a little bit of investigation about what feels right for you, for your baby, for your family. And hopefully this video will help clear up a little bit of misconceptions about home birth and kind of how the home birth culture is in America. And I'll be talking to you about community birth. So when I refer to community birth, that is consistent of home births and giving birth in a freestanding birth center. And freestanding birth centers are not the same as a birth center within a hospital setting. Freestanding birth centers are exactly what they sound like. You can think of a home birth as obviously giving birth in your home, and having a birth center birth as giving birth in someone else's home. Something that is maybe a little bit more clinical, but many times birth centers are renovated homes. They're gonna feel a little less clinical, not as hospital-esque, but yeah, it's usually a nice between middle ground for people that aren't necessarily wanting to have a home birth and know that they don't want to give birth in the hospital. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so this is speaking mainly to my American mamas. I'm an American mom. I'm currently living in Ghana and have been here for the last 6 years. However, I gave birth both times in the US. My first birth was a hospital birth. I had a medical induction at 37 weeks and 4 days. And it was a pretty stereotypical, standard medicalized birth. And then I knew for my second birth, I wanted to have a completely different experience. Though my first birth was overall a positive experience, I still knew second time around, I wanted to go about things differently. So my second birth, I gave birth in a freestanding birth center. I had a water birth back there. And if you've heard my stories in the past, the reason I chose to have a birth center birth instead of a home birth was because we were staying with my parents in Pittsburgh. And thankfully there's a wonderful birth center in the community. It's called the Midwives Center. That was gonna allow me to go to them to give birth, opposed to having a midwife come to me at my parents' house, because to be honest, they didn't want that. I looked into having a home birth and having a home birth midwife. However, that would have required us to stay in an Airbnb or a short-term rental for a longer period of time, and that was just not something we could do. In the future, I 100% would love to have a home birth if it's a normal, healthy, regular pregnancy. So we'll go into a little bit of who makes a good home birth candidate versus someone that maybe is best served in the hospital setting. But once again, this is all to just maybe spark a couple questions in your mind and do a little introspective work to figure out what feels right for you, your baby, and your family. Okay, so in America, There are certified nurse midwives who typically work in the hospital setting, and there are certified professional midwives. Certified professional midwives are typically direct entry midwives, which means they have not gone to nursing school prior to going down a midwifery education path. So in America, as of now, I think about 36 states have certified professional midwives licensure. Why does that matter? Well, if you're deciding that you are interested in a home birth, it's important to understand and know a little bit about the state's home birth friendliness, if you will. States that, such as like California, Utah, Montana, Texas, Florida, Arizona, these are all really great states for home births because CPMs are really infiltrated into the states. There's a better continuity of care where if there was a transfer into the hospital staff are not going to be a little off put by the home birth midwife or whatever. So there are definitely more home birth friendly states than others, but that should not be a deterrent for you and your decisions of how and where you give birth. So this is a map. Everything in blue shows us where CPMs, which is the midwife that I will be, well, not the midwife, but that's the path that I'm taking to become a CPM. This is a map of all the states where CPMs have licensure currently. It's going to change throughout the years. I think another state recently switched, which is amazing because let's be real, it would be incredible if all states were welcoming and licensed CPMs. Over time, I think that will happen. So all the states in blue have CPM licensure. Here we are. And what that means is if your state has CPM licensure, that likely means that it's going to be a more home birth friendly state. So for example, I'm from Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania currently does not have CPM licensure, but plenty of women decide to give birth at home in PA. So how does that work? What happens if you live in a state where there's not licensure for CPMs? Does that mean midwives have to kind of work underground, or is it just the fact that states don't recognize them? And honestly, some midwives in states without licensure actually prefer it because then the state cannot dictate exactly how you practice. Whereas like in California, for example, I know some of the more traditional midwives were not very excited about the licensure of the state because there are certain guidelines and laws put into place of how midwives can practice. Meaning midwives in California back in the day were happy to attend twin births and breech and see women after 42 weeks, but the laws change how they can practice, meaning if someone is at their 42-week mark and they haven't gone into labor yet, that client would have to transfer into hospital care, and then the hospital would continue care from there. So every state is different, and this is what makes America cool but also complicated, because one thing that is how, like, if something is a certain way in California, for example, versus Florida, it can be completely opposite, or in a state that doesn't have licensure at all. It's just something to be aware of. So if you are home birth curious, I would first go and look up to see if your state has CPMs. So a great resource is NACP. That is the National Association of Certified Professional Midwives. This is the website right here. And there you can learn a little bit more about CPMs in general and where the licensure is, XYZ. So that's a great place to start. Also, so if you decide that you are interested in pursuing a home birth, you could honestly, it seems kind of crazy, but finding midwives online on Instagram is honestly a good way to go. And many times, these practitioners, of course, are going to be happy to schedule a consultation with you and answer any questions you may have about the prenatal care, about how the birth will go, and then the postpartum care from there. And some women, for example, in PA, since it's not a state that has licensure for CPMs, sometimes women will do like a congruent care where maybe they see an obstetrician for the 20-week scan or something like that, just because CPMs cannot prescribe ultrasounds, for example, and they can't do their own labs. But in other states, midwives can do everything that they need to as far as drawing labs, getting you in for ultrasounds, or having you get an ultrasound at their office. It just, once again, varies greatly from state to state. But wherever you are, once you maybe find a couple midwives in your area and schedule a consultation with them, it is amazing to go with a list of questions you may have. They will be gracious and answer them. And many, many times, I think women walk away from a consultation with the right fit midwife feeling really excited to give birth, excited about their pregnancy, and feel like they really made a true connection with their care provider. And that's one thing that's incredible about midwifery care is many clients, the women giving birth and their families, feel like they've really built a nice rapport with their midwives. And in my opinion, that is what makes all of the difference. Knowing that you are going to be at your birth with a midwife that you've gotten to know, or a group of midwives that you've gotten to know, versus being in the hospital setting where you don't know which care provider is on call. Maybe you've never met that doctor. You've definitely not met any of the nurses. So those are just some serious things to consider. And if home birth seems so out there for you, you're not alone. Almost 99% of births take place in the hospital in America. The number is slightly growing for home births or community births, meaning home births and birth centers. It's about 1% to 2%. So home birth may be something that is like completely foreign to you, and why the heck would someone want to choose a home birth over the hospital? It really comes down to your own personal beliefs, what you deem to be safer. There are so many studies that prove home birth for low risk women and babies is just as safe as it is to have birth in the hospital. But for you, once again, no one can decide what risks you're comfortable with versus being in the hospital or the home. And it's only a decision that you can make for yourself. And of course, you're going to want the support of your partner most importantly. But if you have family members that are like, oh my God, you're crazy, how could you ever consider a home birth? That is a hard thing to navigate, but it is important to build boundaries, turn in, listen to your intuition and your gut. What is your intuition telling you about this birth? I think women have superpowers when they're pregnant, and they become very spiritually connected. And I think more than ever, we have an ability to follow our gut and our intuition about what is right for you and your birth. Okay, so questions to ask yourself are like, are you okay with going against the norm? Are you okay with being a little bit alternative and going with alternative care? If so, home birth, of course, is an amazing option for you. At the end of the day, birth works best when we feel safe, when we feel private, when we feel love. Many women choose home births for that reason. You are in an area that you are comfortable. This is your home. This is your bed. This is your shower. This is your toilet. This is where you feel most safe. Physiologic, normal, natural birth unfolds the best when we are comfortable and safe. We feel protected and private. Many women have, they'll report that they're in like hardcore labor at home and they're feeling good and moving, and then they realize it's time to go to the hospital, so they go in, and then their labor stalls out. There's no mystery of why this happens. It happens because all of a sudden you're taken out of your private little cocoon, and you are in a foreign environment with people all over the place, bright lights, loud noises, sterile. It's different, okay? So obviously I am biased to believe that for myself personally, and for so many women, home birth can be an incredible option. But once again, this is not to tell you where to give birth, how to give birth. This is up to you. It's just my perspective on it and a little bit of my experiences, okay? So that's one thing. You have to be really comfortable with the fact that you are going against the grain. You might get some backlash from others that are less inclined to believe that a home birth is a normal, safe option. But once again, you need to make sure that with whatever decision you make, that you are comfortable and confident in that decision, that your husband or your partner is confident in that decision. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your mother or your mother-in-law or your dad, sisters, friends think. That doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that you are able to make the right decision for you and your baby, or what feels right for you and your baby. And you can be very vague with others. It's no one's business, to be honest, where you give birth, how you give birth, and the decisions that you make for you and your baby. So if you have to, lay firm boundaries down and let your family members or friends know that you're not sharing your birth plan right now, then so be it. At the end of the day, if you feel like a home birth or a birth center birth is best for you, then you need to go with that decision, okay? So to clarify a little bit, my very first video I've ever posted on this channel is about midwives. Midwives are extremely knowledgeable and skilled and spiritual and believe in birth. They believe in you. They believe in the natural process of birth, okay? But what happens if something goes wrong? That's always the biggest concern for clients is, okay, great, I love the idea of all this, but what happens if my baby needs resuscitated? What if I have a postpartum hemorrhage? What if my labor stalls and I want an epidural? What if? Okay, so these are all really important questions to ask yourself and ask your midwife or your potential midwife about what happens if an emergency happens. What happens if you decide, I don't want to do this anymore, I want to go to the hospital, get an epidural, get some rest? Your midwife, who is likely very experienced and has had multiple scenarios, will talk to you all about how she handles these things. So midwives are going to have the necessary resuscitation equipment. They're going to have sutures if you have any tearing. They're going to have the necessary medications if you have any postpartum bleeding that's too heavy or a postpartum hemorrhage. They come fully equipped to you to handle any emergency situations. And midwives are so skilled and so trained to what normal looks like that when there are any yellow flags arising, say baby has some fetal heart tones that are not sounding too good, and maybe there's some fetal distress and the baby's heart rate isn't bouncing back up, they are fully trained to identify when these yellow flags are happening and when maybe a transport to the hospital is deemed necessary, all of those scenarios. Or say you had a perfectly normal birth, but you had a very severe tear, then that may indicate that it's important for you to get transferred to the hospital for an obstetrician to do your suturing. Midwives are trained to do repairs, suturing after a birth, but typically a first or second degree tear, which is less severe than a third or fourth degree. So in that case, it would be indicated for a transfer to the hospital. So once again, there are so many things that can happen in birth, and we respect that. Many, many times birth will unfold very straightforward when we do less. Birth is designed to work. Things happen, but this is why midwives are fully trained and skilled to address any concerns that come up in labor or birth or the postpartum period, okay? So once again, when you're having an interview with your potential midwife or midwives at the birth center, these are all really important things to talk about and discuss and make sure you can assess your comfort level if any of these things were to occur. Okay. So another thing that a future mama may want to reflect on is, if I have a home birth or birth center birth, am I okay with going all natural? Meaning, in the hospital setting, you know that you have access to an epidural or IV medications that are meant to help with pain. You know that an anesthesiologist is around, okay? And I think, especially with first-time moms, there's a level of uncertainty or fear that I'm not going to be able to handle the pain. I want to tell you that you are way stronger than you probably think you are. Mothers, women are freaking badasses, and you are incredible, and women have been giving birth since the beginning of time. Okay, so thinking you have a low pain tolerance in birth, it's not what you think it is. Okay, so normal natural labor, it's a building process. Our bodies are releasing these hormones. It's a symphony of hormones. And as our body and our uterus is contracting, our brain is signaling, okay, things are flowing. We are going to release endorphins. So endorphins are nature's painkillers. So though you're experiencing the intensity of contractions, your body's also releasing these incredible feel-good endorphins that is going to combat the pain or intensity that we're experiencing. So having had both experiences, my labor in the hospital was far, far, far worse than my natural labor in the birth center. I will say the pushing phase and transition and the pushing phase for my second birth was very, very intense, but it was very short. And when it was over, it was like such a relief, and I felt so high. With my first birth, I got an epidural right before I was about to push. I didn't know that was going to be the case. So for me, the hardest part of my first labor was the true labor. And then the pushing felt fun because I was under epidural anesthesia at that point. And then the inverse was true when it came to my second birth, during my water birth. So just know that labor is meant to be felt. In our modern world, I think it's really easy just to want to like get rid of the pain, not suffer, not have this experience. But if you're a spiritual girly like myself, I think you'll realize that labor and birth and motherhood in general is a portal to the divine. It's a portal to, the veil is so thin. When you're in between and giving birth, it's like your little human is about to literally come into their body and come to earth for the first time. I may sound woo-woo, that's okay. But birth is a very spiritual experience, and many midwives see it that way. And that's why I resonate so much with home births and community birth, is because I've experienced it, yes, but also I've always felt like this connection to the spirit realm, and I know that my true calling is to be a midwife in this capacity. So home birth midwives typically view birth in that spiritual lens, opposed to giving birth in the hospital where there's more of a medical lens on birth, okay? So it all comes down to the fundamentals of what you believe about birth, how you want to experience birth. Many women who give birth unmedicated or in the home or birth center feel super empowered. They feel so proud of themselves. They have an epic birth high. Your oxytocin levels are exploding. And that's something that no one can take away from you. You don't get a trophy, of course. You don't get a medal for having an unmedicated birth, but what you do get is indescribable. You know that having done something so challenging, that after that, you can do anything. And newsflash, motherhood is hard. Having a birth experience that left you feeling empowered and proud of yourself is only going to be a benefit to you as you walk into your motherhood journey. So if you're a first-time mom interested in home birth, I say congratulations to you. You're willing to think outside the box. That's incredible. If you are maybe a second or third time mom considering a home birth or a community birth, also amazing, bravo. Maybe you had a less than ideal first hospital birth experience. Maybe you had a traumatic birth. Maybe you had a cesarean birth that was unexpected. All of these things are valid to want to consider a home birth. And I'm here to tell you that a home birth can be an incredible option for you. Don't let other people's opinions interfere with your decision making. And at the end of the day, it is an internal job to make these decisions for you and your baby and what feels safe. And I think after you meet with your midwife or midwives and have any questions that come up answered, you will feel very confident and comfortable in making the decision that feels right for you. So that's my spiel. I hope that this video is helpful to you. I hope that it maybe answered a few questions. And yes, I just think bravo. If you are just curious about birth outside of the system, amazing. You're already on the right track. If you have any comments or questions, please make sure to drop them down below. I will make sure to get to them. If you've had a positive home birth experience, please make sure to share them in the comments as well. And I'd love for you to hop over to Instagram and follow me there. My Instagram handle is @birthandbloom. Also on TikTok, my husband is dealing with that. And yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.